Hey everyone, it's sometimes joined by Uncommon Fossil again, and this is the Reasonably Effective Podcast, I believe episode 11. So
Yep.
we're getting big time now. I don't know why 11 means that we're big time, but whatever. And today we're going to be talking about live a lot, honestly. And of course the new set Scarlet Violet because that just came out.
Yep.
So obviously I've been playing a lot of the new stuff and live. I haven't played much PTCG if any this past week. Obviously I haven't migrated yet. And I'm going to say this, I've said this a number of times, but my advice is that you should not migrate your account from PTCGO to PTCG Live, because Pokemon TCG Live is in like a very iffy spot. It seems like it's doing okay for now, but it's very sketchy. But play on Live so you can get stuff, especially the free decks and the decks on the ladder. I think that's very important for any
hmm
player, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, even if you haven't migrated, if you have migrated, you're playing on live all the time. But do it every day. Do the daily challenges. Um, if you're still in PTCGO, you might want to do some challenges in that too to boost that account. But maybe it's not worth it. Let me ask you a question. As a budget player that hasn't migrated, are you finding it easy to access the new cards enough?
I guess I haven't tried. I haven't crafted too many new decks. I
Okay.
haven't played the Gardevoir or Miraidon decks yet, but
Yep.
you get most of the stuff for free
hmm
on the ladder. I guess I'm not exactly sure, but I found with I have like spent resources, the in-game
Yep.
resources, to acquire some new cards, but I think it's relatively doable.
Okay.
And within I think by the end of the month, I'll certainly have access to any card that I would want, I think. And also, you made a
hmm
video on the how to like acquire, convert like well, you made a video on the economy, right? And so, what's the best
Yeah.
way to do that?
I mean, I'm still trying to figure out the economy because it's still relatively new. But you have the 50 tiers in the battle pass, and obviously unlock the premium battle pass. That's I think always going to be true. It's pretty cheap within the game, and the rewards are well worth it. Um, you get 8 starter decks now. You get the two tier 0 decks in the battle pass, and as you get up to 50 tiers, I think you get like 70 or 80 packs of Scarlet and Violet you'll open, so you're going to pull a decent number of cards plus a decent number of crystals and credits. So even if you don't have much, by the time you're done with it, you will have a good amount of stuff. The less resources you have, probably the more you should hold off on crafting, especially the higher cost cards, I think, because you will run through things. The EXs are a lot cheaper than the Vs, though, because, right, the EXs are cheaper even than Vs. And like a V Star V Max, you had to craft a V and the V Star V Max. So it's a big savings, which is certainly a plus.
Yeah, like the Regieleki Miraidon deck, the big cost. The reason I haven't like gotten that yet is because the Regieleki VMAXs are so expensive, and I just can't really afford it. I mean, I maybe can, um, but like there are a lot of very affordable decks, which we're gonna talk about because they give you um 8 new starter decks, which
Right.
I'm assuming means that if you join now, you won't get the old starter decks, which is fine.
Yeah.
Most of those weren't super relevant, anyways. I don't think so. Yeah, it's not a big deal, but it's a big deal that they give you the 8 new decks, right?
Right. I'm glad. Obviously, for us as for that have been around, getting it's good, but especially for new players, right? I assume with Live and Scarlet and Violet dropping, it will get some new people in, and if they didn't have actually playable standard decks, since all you can do is play standard, it wouldn't be really fun for people. So I'm glad that they've given these out, and as we get through it, it's a good basis to start from, I think. A comment on Live in general. This week it dropped on Thursday. There was a big update Tuesday, but actually the Monday of this week, I think that things started badly. That there was like 2 hours on Monday that the servers
Of last like
of the previous week.
yeah, not the
From
week
what
not the Monday, like today Monday,
That's true. We're dropping on a
which is
Monday.
actually tomorrow Monday, but
Correct. Yeah,
whatever.
record right. We're recording the day before, but right. So a week before this is dropping. There were 2 hours you couldn't log in, which wasn't good. Then Tuesday they updated the game to get ready for Scarlet and Violet, which is typical. And then after that, they had the issue with Scoop Up Net not working, which isn't terrible in one sense because it was rotating. But if you wanted to like play like a Drizzile engine or something right before it rotated, you're out of luck, which is unfortunate. But then the big thing is rotation came like what 16 hours early or something. on
Yeah.
the Wednesday, and that was a bad sign. But quite frankly, once Scarlet and Violet became available, it's been pretty smooth. It's been probably better than other expansions, I think, in the past in live anyway.
Yeah, I think, and it certainly had the potential to be like go horribly wrong. I haven't really had too many issues. They still haven't fixed a lot of the issues that they had before,
Yeah,
such as the issue with the metal Pokemon making sound, which
yeah,
means decks like Dialga, which is a very solid deck right now, um, are very unpleasant to play. They're physically painful, um,
yes,
because it's just so loud. And then also the issue of like the glasses like glitching back, and I think now there's a hair glitch, um, that's like hasn't been fixed. That's kind of annoying.
yeah.
Um, but at least the cards work mostly.
Yeah, the gameplay I don't think has gotten worse than it was before, but they haven't fixed things. But at least in the past with things like this, it caused a whole series of new problems, which it seems like that's not happened at least.
Yeah, I think there's a glitch with Golurk V where it just doesn't really work, but that's not played too much, so it's not a huge deal.
Yeah. So, anyways, so we have live. If you want to play Scarlet and Violet on online, you can't use PTCGO, as everyone knows, right? They've stopped adding the new cards to that so that they can focus on live, which it makes sense. I mean, it's unfortunate that they did that before live was actually fully functional, but it is what it is. But so you want to play the new cards, you're in live, and we have these new starter decks. Do you want to? Should we jump in and start talking about those?
Yeah, sure. So the what's the first one you want to talk about?
All right, so we have eight decks with all different types. We'll jump in with the Dragon deck, which may be the strongest deck, or it's probably the closest to being a strong deck, and that's Giratina V Star. With the nice thing, Giratina V Star, 280 HP is a Dragon type, so no weakness, and it does 280 with Lost Impact. So you're one shotting obviously all Vs and V stars and most EXs too, depending. Some of them you can't, so the stage twos in particular.
Yeah, you
But
don't one shot all V stars, but you one shot almost all the V stars.
yeah, right. There's ways you don't, but the majority of them you can, right? At 280, you put two energy in the lost zone, which in some ways feels bad, but then you also want to get things in the lost zone for your Star Requiem attack, which for two energy, this is a grass and a psychic. As long as you have 10 cards, at least in the lost zone, you knock out your opponent's active Pokemon. That's your V Star power, which is quite good, and it's the way to handle those big V Maxes or EXs or even V Stars that you can't one shot with your first attack. So it's a very powerful attacker. They give you the Lost Zone engine, which is what I really like that about it, because for new players, that's one of the top decks. Lost Zone opens up a lot of things, so I'm glad they've given everybody that. So two Cramorant, two Sableye, four Comfies, one Snorlax, which has its place, and a Luminion to draw with. And you can. No, does it play a water energy? I'm trying to think. Yes, it does.
Yeah, it plays one water
One, so
energy.
you
So
could
you can
attack with it.
attack.
Um, and then obviously you've got a number of switching cards. You've lost Scoop Up Net, but which make is a switch card, and also it would let you reuse your Comfies, which the reuse is certainly that's a hit. But you have Beach Court has been added, which that gives your basic Pokemon one less retreat cost. So now your Comfies can retreat for free. So that kind of makes up for net. You play Switching and Rope. So and four cross switcher, which I'm finding isn't. I was very skeptical about that, since you don't have the Italian engine to search for, but you can with four of them, and you're drawing enough. Often cross switcher is viable in the deck.
Yeah, I feel like and so usually so Lost Zone's one of the best decks in the game right now. I think many
Yeah,
people would say, especially looking at the what people call like the Japanese format, which is the format. It's the same format, but they had it in Japan and a few other places longer than us. And Lost
right.
Zone has been one of the best decks. Not usually played with Giratina, but sometimes paired with it. This looks pretty similar. Generally, less Ultra Ball, less Nest Ball, and then Battle VIP passes put in, and cross switches usually dropped in, and instead the
Right.
list usually play bosses orders, like more boss orders, um, Probably, I was gonna say a Serena, probably not a Serena, but then also Gardenia's has dropped for
Hmm.
possibly something like a Roxanne, one or two Roxannes, and then Radiant Greninja is almost always thrown in these lists.
Yeah.
Um, and then more water energies,
Hmm.
usually less grass lists, psychic, more water. Um, and energy recycle is usually thrown in these lists as well. I'm not super familiar with Lost Zone. I don't play a ton, but it usually looks something like that. Luckily, you
Yeah.
do get most of those cards. You get I'm sure you get another boss dodge in something, hopefully.
Um,
And then
yeah.
do you get Roxanne in any of the other decks? Do you remember?
That's a good question. I think I was. We'll remember. I think one of the decks did play that. I think as I was working through, yeah, the Superior V Star
Superior, yeah.
plays
Um,
one.
so you can like you have access to that, and then the most important thing I'd say that this list doesn't play is the Radiant Greninja.
Yeah.
Um, and so luckily you have that, and I think multiple other starter decks, which is kind of weird, but yeah, you really have everything you need to make this work, except for possibly a thicker Giratina line, which is very expensive to craft.
Yeah.
But I've not actually ran that. You've played with all eight of the decks, right?
Yeah. I've played with all of them at least a little bit. This deck I played a decent amount, and it works pretty. I mean, it is potentially is the strongest of the decks. It's at least the one that I think has the easiest upgrade to be a top tier deck. I wouldn't play Lost Zone with Giratina probably. Gudra probably is a better way to go, but again, those V stars get expensive to craft. Um, and you can do it without the V star too. You could drop the Giratina, but it's a good deck. Giratina hits some pretty good numbers. You might want some. There's no tools I don't think in this deck list, right? So you might want a tool,
Yeah.
Defiance Band or something to get the damage up to what you need at times. Um, I found for some reason this list has been a little more awkward to start up than I expected, and I'm not sure if I still don't have the rhythm of this deck yet, or if the trainers just need a little adjusting. Because, like you said, they do need some adjusting. They play a Thornton in this deck, which I don't know if you really want a Thornton.
Yeah, I think Lauren sometimes he's playing Lost Zone. It's like so with Lost Zone, there are a few ways to play. You said there's Giratina or
Yeah.
there's Gudra. You could cut those, but then usually you're running Pokemon Vs, such as
Hmm.
Glen Zapdos V, Drapion V. I don't know about Drapion, but then Raikou V, um, something else. I don't remember what they run, but Dragonite V,
Yeah.
and then with Sky Seal Stone. So that's what's sometimes implemented in these lists as
Hmm.
well. Which Sky Seal Stone essentially you want to have a V Star power in pretty much every deck in the game if you can, and Sky Seal Stone is instead of like the V Star powers on the Pokemon V Star themselves. It allows you to take extra prizes with
Yeah.
your Pokemon Vs, and it's pretty solid. But I think this is definitely a very solid list, the Giratina
Hmm.
list. And it's easy to just make a few tweaks. You can definitely get away with spending less than 1,000 credits, which is pretty cheap, and then making this a very like viable deck. Even the way it is, I think it's pretty viable. I think the biggest thing I think Battle VIP Pass does increase the consistency of this deck,
Hmm.
allowing you to get Comfies up earlier and like just draw more cards in the early game.
Yeah, I mean, you could just take this deck list and take some of the cards from the other starter decks if you don't have if you're brand new and definitely upgrade this, right? You can probably get rid of Giratina's and some other the one get I mean, yeah, Giratina's vigor,
Gardenia's yeah.
Gardenia's vigor. Sorry, yeah, I knew that sounded wrong. And make some changes, get the Battle VIP pass, get a little more consistent with it, and up this deck list. But it's certainly a strong deck. Um, I guess it's the closest I think of all the lists to a top tier deck, right? Probably, I think it's certainly probably a top 10 deck depending how you look at things with a little bit of
It's
tweaking.
definitely yeah. I think it's like Lost Box is definitely in top 10 deck. Also, it's I think out of all the decks, it's the only um one that like survived rotation completely,
Yeah.
or not completely, but mostly unscathed, and also is like a clear top tier deck. I'd say the Dialga deck's very solid. Or the Dialga in current standard is very good,
Hmm.
and um some of the other ones have potential, but yeah, I'd say Lost Zone's like very close to what people are like thinking is very good right now.
Yeah, so I'm super happy that they gave it. It's a really nice place to start. And you brought up Dialga, so why don't we jump to that for the second deck? because Dialga is a top tier deck potentially. Now this build is I think fairly different than what you're going to see in some of those lists. Um,
Yeah, I guess so.
now
But
I don't know what the current Dialga lists are, quite frankly, but so Dialga V Star 280 HP. It does the Metal Blast attack, 40 plus 40 more for each metal energy attached to this Pokemon. The list just plays basic metal energies. And then the Star Chronos attack, which is his V Star power 220, takes 5 energies, 4 of which are metal. And you get to take another turn after this without your opponent having a turn. You skip checkup and you go right into your next turn. So a chance to potentially to take like 4 or 5 prizes back to back, depending where you're at. If you can one shot something with the 220, then the Metal Blast has at least 5 energy, maybe 6 or more because you got that extra turn. So you're doing big damage with the second attack also with it. So very powerful. It just plays a 2/2 Dialga V Star, which is actually what I think all of the top builds play anyway. You play very thin lines of Dialga, one Zamazenta V to help set up. I found it a little awkward. It's got the Regal Stance ability, lets you discard your hand to draw 5 and your turn ends. So you kind of would want to use it at the start of the game when you're setting up, because obviously you want to attack later on. But I found that, early on, I don't necessarily want to discard my whole hand either. So
yeah, this is like a replacement for Zacian V, which was in the old Dialga list, right?
yes, right, Zacian V. But there you drew 3 cards. You didn't discard your hand, so it's a safer. That was a much safer play. Zamazenta is more niche of when you could use it, I think. And then it's got Revenge Blast. One for 3 energy does 120 plus 30 more for each prize card. It's an okay attack, but you certainly would want to be attacking with Dialga V Star instead.
Yeah, definitely. I personally think it's pretty all right in terms of its like attacking. I like it. Also, this plays Mag Zone, meaning
Yeah.
that you play Rare Candy. Um, it plays the Arvin, which I'm not. Where's Arvin? Where Arvin? Which I'm not a big fan of. It searches for a tool and item, but I think in Rare Candy decks does solid value. And then this allows you to set Mag Zone, which accelerates energy. Look at the top 6, accelerate any metal energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way you want.
Right.
Um, since this plays a solid chunk of energy in 14,
Yep.
meaning that you hit around 1 each time, maybe 2,
Hmm.
which is okay. And you have Energy Recycler as well. We also see this list running the Barrel Engine, meaning it works kind of well for Ultra Ball. 1 battle VIP pass. You're not a big fan of that, are you?
Well, yeah. I mean, the one battle VAP pass. I guess it's if you go second, then you play your Arvin, right, and you get it. I guess
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
the idea. I
thought.
think that's fine.
Um,
Um, I think that's fine. And then I don't like the four Avery. I don't think are very good here. Especially with like Babero. I don't think they have a lot of synergy. They don't search out specific cards, so you're gonna kind of still struggle to get set up your Magnezone. I also think a fourth Rare Candy could be played. It's not necessary, but um,
mhm.
it does run. Yeah, so this list runs 3 boss, which is very nice. But then because it plays Arvin, it runs lots of tools, so it runs full face guard, reducing damage,
Yep.
as well as Tool Jammer, turning off other tools. And honestly, both these tools I don't think are very good in this deck.
I mean, obviously, the full face guard you get that on your Dialga, so it does it takes 20 less damage, so it's better than even adding 20 HP. So, um, it, obviously, there are some things that hit at the 280 mark that would one shot you avoid, and even for things that are smaller, you might force your opponent to 3 shot you. Um, I mean, the big thing is you want to survive at least one attack, right? Because then you're, especially if you use your V Star power, and then you're attacking 3 times with one Dialga, and you kind of have to do that because you're putting so much energy onto that Dialga. Although with Magnezone you have a chance of powering up the second Dialga too, because you need decent amount of energy to have the damage add up.
Yeah, I definitely think you can get a second Dialga up. It only plays a 2/2.
Right.
But you can get like a Zamzinda, or you can attack with Magnezone, which doesn't feel too awful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like this list is solid. I played it a few times and it went okay. Actually for my April Fool's video, because I was like, everyone, they fixed live, and then I showed off they did not fix like the metal glitch and all that stuff. But Yeah, I think so. You have not played Dalgan's like regular Dalgan standard, right?
Not since rotation. I have played it before rotation, but not how it is now. I mean, I played this list a couple times. I don't think the tool jammer right now has much value. I could be wrong, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And you know, energy recycler is good. Maybe it should get a second one if you need to discard it earlier on. I'm not sure. You don't need
Yeah, it
four.
doesn't run like research the only way you discards it the Ultra Ball,
Yeah,
so it's not too bad.
no. Although maybe the deck should get some research. I don't know because you don't, like you said. I don't think you want four Avery, and you probably don't want four Arvin either, right? I think you can cut thin those down.
I don't know. I think so. I'll talk now about the way it's played in current standard, which I've talked about to you, and you seem to doubt, but it is the way it is
Oh,
played.
and I've been running. Okay, and I've actually like in the last few days I see this deck more and more. So go on, talk about this deck of bizarreness to me.
Hmm. Well, it runs a 3/3 Dialga. So this one actually, and it is Magnezone as well. Honestly like the 4/4/1/4 Magnezone isn't necessary. Um, at all. Like that's
Hmm.
kind of silly. I mean, it's kind of makes sense, but you're still playing for Ultra Ball. I think another rare candy would be better. So with the other list, I have to dub this insane Dialga. It was played in I think Thailand at like a big tournament.
Yeah.
Um, and it did well, so everyone's like hyping it up, and it's a really cool list. Notably, it runs the new Magnemite, which I highly recommend you pick up. You'll probably pull it from packs, but it's certainly pretty nice. It is lightning type, which is the most important aspect here, meaning that you can search it out with Miraidon EX, which you get free on the ladder, but you need to make sure you log in before like the next set, which is like in 3 months or something. So you can pick up the Miraidon, allowing you to search for two basic lightning Pokemon, and search for. You can also search for so you can search for two Magnemites, put them onto your bench, or Rotom V, which has its ability to draw three on your turn ends. Very essentially the same as Zacian, which has better synergy because with Zamazenta V, you
Hmm.
don't want to be discarding your rare candies or your Magnezone, so Rotom V just grows your hand, which is pretty nice. Although you will get judged a lot. Um, but the Miraidon EX is nice for setup, and then you also run this list runs 20 metal energy and then 2 lightning energy for Magnezone EX, the lightning type, which is an okay attacker. Um,
Yeah.
then it also runs, because 20 metal energy, it runs Adamant. So the 20 metal means you're hitting more energy off of Magnezone.
Yeah.
And then Adamant obviously allows you to discard 2 metal energy from your hand, which is a bit of a steep cost, but with this many metal, it should almost always be active. You search your deck for 2 cards and put them into your hand, such as your rare candy Magnezone. And it also plays 2 copies of Irida, allowing you to search for a water Pokemon in an item. Another way to search for rare candy.
Hmm.
And also Radiant Greninja or Luminion, which are your water Pokemon in the deck. So both of these feel better than Arven, in my opinion, because they're just more versatile and powerful. It doesn't run any tools in this list, but yeah, I think this list is very solid. And it's the way people are playing Dialga right now. Honestly, it's probably like if you're playing live, it's probably in the top 5 decks you'll see when you're playing live.
Yeah, I've been running into. I mean, generally speaking, a deck with 22 energies is usually a meme deck, but this seems to have value. So maybe maybe things are moving in this way. I don't know. We will see how
Yeah,
well it holds up.
I think I'd highly recommend everyone watching this should try this list. It's pretty cheap. Honestly, you don't need the Mag Zone. It's not a super cheap deck in the fact that you need to craft a Delga V and V Star and Rotom V, which are
Hmm.
all kind of expensive, but it's not awful. And then the rest of the stuff's pretty cheap, or you already have it. You might need like Stormy Mountains, Adamant, Irida. I'm not Irida, but Adamant,
Hmm.
Stormy Mountains. But all in all, it's a pretty cheap deck, and it's a very funny deck to play.
Yeah. So check out 10 types video on this Dialga list, and I do like the Adamant. I do like that as a card. What you discard 2 metal and search for 2 cards, correct? If I
Yeah.
recall. So a card I haven't really been able to use yet, but obviously you're running enough energy in this list that you can pull that off. So that's a nice little option there too.
Yeah. But I feel like that's all there's to say. It's
Yes.
very solid. I definitely wouldn't recommend you play it, but also you need to pick up stuff. You need to. I think you have to play like the new build, The one they give you isn't awful, but it's not good enough. I don't think.
No, but any of these lists are worth giving a try to. I would
Yeah, yeah,
encourage that. But yeah, you'll find generally speaking they're not quite good enough, right? But they're fun, and you will win games on the ladder for sure. Why don't we talk about not quite good enough? Certainly fits this next deck, Regieleki VMAX, which we had talked about the Regieleki in a previous podcast. And they built a Regieleki deck, but not how I think you or I would want to do it. It's a 2/2 Regieleki VMAX, so you would want more really, but it's got the transistor ability. Your basic lightning Pokemon do 30 more damage. It does have a useful attack. Max Thunder and Lightning does 220, but it can't attack the next turn, but it has free retreat, so that's okay. 310 HP, so it's fairly tanky. The V does it doesn't have free retreat on the V, but the second attack does 100 damage, and then this the Pokemon takes 100 less damage the next turn, so it could have a place in it, and it would get boosted by any VMAX you have in play.
yeah. Also, the first attack on the V, switching bolt 30 and switch to your bench,
Mm-hmm.
actually is seeing a lot of play in standard right now.
Okay.
Regieleki VMAX is very solid. And then you can hit and run into Klefki,
Mm,
notably encounter a Lost Zone, which
yeah.
turns off abilities of all basic Pokemon.
Right.
And that gets boosted by Regieleki's VMAXs, but you really want a much thicker line of Regieleki to be able to do that.
Right, to make that 30 become meaningful, especially in Lost Zone. If you get three, even with two VMAXs, now you can might be one shotting a Comfy. You need three in play to one shot the Cramorant, though.
You hit it for weakness.
That is true. So you don't need you just need one in play then, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So okay, good. Yeah, and then you've got one Raikou V, which is a very solid attacker. One of is probably not enough. It does 20 plus 20 per bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. And it's got the fleet-footed ability where if it's active, you draw one card. The ability is useful, but it's certainly not the reason you play it. But the attack, it's the biggest damage. Well, I mean the VMAX can do more damage, but
Well, they do the same amount, and then the VMAX can buff Raikou V.
right. So
So
right,
Raikou V still will hit the most damage.
right. If
Or
you
can
yeah,
theoretically.
if the benches are small, then Raikou does less. But yeah, Raiku's only two prizes. It's just two energy instead of three for the VMAX. So it's a very good attacker in this deck. It's the biggest attacker in it, but only one of is. I probably would prefer some more. And then you have some single prize basics to choose from. You have the Pachirisu, which is a new card, which I think is pretty useful. I think you don't agree on that, but it's 70 HP, so not very. You're going to get knocked out each turn, but it does 10 plus 20 more damage for each bench lightning Pokemon. And it says this attack damage isn't affected by weakness, so you don't get the multiplier for weakness, unfortunately. But if they have resistance, it does kick in, I guess. So that's a bit unfortunate.
Yeah, I think there's not lightning resistance. So
Okay.
usually they word it. They say isn't affected by weakness and resistance if it hits resistance with stuff like fighting,
Mhm.
grass, and then um if it doesn't have a resistance in the game, they'll say it's not affected by weakness, and that's it. I think.
Okay. Obviously, if they print something with lightning resistance later on, it would impact. But
Yeah.
so obviously it doesn't hit for weakness, but it does. You're filling. You only play lightning Pokemon. You usually are filling up your bench, so you're doing 110 damage, and then you get boosted by your V maxes. So 110, 140, or 170. 170 on a basic single price Pokemon 2 energy is not a bad number. Is what I'll say. It's not great, but it's not.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It is, and if you rebuilt the deck with more V maxes, then it becomes even more meaningful. So to me, this is kind of one of the key attackers in the deck. You have three here. You did pick up a fourth one in the Miraidon EX deck on the Battle Pass. So if you ever want to switch that out, then it really loves Zero Aura though. They give you four of these. 110 HP. It's got two attacks. The first is 30 for one energy. And if your opponent's active poke is an evolution, it does 30 more. Uh, it's for single energy, but it's not a lot of damage. And then Mach Bolt, it does 80 damage for 3. Not great again for 3 energies. You like to do more than 80. It does have free retreat, so it's a pivot. I don't know why they put 4 into the deck though. I gotta say, it's just not very useful from my
Y-
standpoint.
Yeah, it definitely feels bad. And then there's also the Regieleki, right, which does
Yeah,
120. Discard all lightning energy from this Pokemon and does 40 to 2 your opponent's benched, which is okay, but because there's only one Regieleki, you're not going to be taking multiple prizes on their bench Pokemon. And
right.
does this list play? It doesn't play any Pokemon recovery either.
No, in a card like the Regieleki, in like the Miraidon with Flaffy list, then it makes more sense because you discard the energy, you can power up this one or another one the next turn. Here, it's not that easy to get the energies on. Well, you have electric generator. We'll get to that, but and it's just not a great. I don't think the payoff is terrific in this deck with that attacker. And the energy is all basic lightning. And for part of that is you play electric generators. I said you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You get 4 of this, and I'm really glad for that because this is a really fun card. I think you look at the top 5 cards, attach up to 2 basic lightning energy you find there to your bench lightning Pokemon any way you like. So can't go to the active, but it goes to the bench, and it can go to 2 different Pokemon if you want. So it's really nice. It's an item, so there's 4 of them. You can use multiple ones in a turn. 14 energy, you'll kind of average about 1 per turn, perhaps. In some ways, you might want to start to thicken up the energy line if you're really going to take advantage of it to hit things a little more consistently, because you're not really controlling what's the top card on the deck. With this deck, you don't at all. There's not a lot of ways to do that, but I think it's a fun card that opens up possibilities.
Yeah, I think it definitely is good. One really weird thing about this deck, and I'll talk about, I guess, because I feel like I have to, the Miraidon EX deck. First
Hmm.
of all, Miraidon EX has great synergy with not only the Dialga deck, but also the Regieleki deck. In
Yeah.
fact, they're very good together. I'd highly recommend you play them together. And that runs Flaffy. It
Yeah.
does not run Electricity Generator, which just functions differently. If you stick the two of them together, you're definitely going to end up with something very solid, I think. You
Hmm.
can do that how you want. You can choose to play Flaffy or Electricity Generator. You can go in with more. You can just choose which attackers you want. Um, but I think that it's clear that the decks are designed to go together.
Yeah, it is, and it's good for us, the people now that are playing, because you get the Miraidon deck on the Battle Pass. People, if they're starting up 3 months from now, the Battle Pass will have reset, so they're not going to have access to the Miraidon. All they're going to have is this Regieleki deck, and that's not great. So it's a little weird that way. I mean, I understand why they put the Miraidon on the Battle Pass, but later on, without that, it's not as good. I mean, to me, I think you can. The Miraidon deck is very different. So if I wanted to upgrade this, I think I'd focus on the Regieleki and single prize attackers. Oh, the other thing, because it really is a single prize deck, because they play 4 Cynthia's Ambition, and that's where you draw to 5 cards in hand. If your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you draw till you have 8 cards instead. So it's really designed with single prize decks where you're getting knocked out most turns. It's a way to draw to 8. The biggest hand size that I think any thing allows you to get to. So it's designed to have knocked out a lot, which means it's got to be single prize. So they've gone that direction with this, which isn't unreasonable, but they've made some odd choices. Probably the biggest one is the Leafy Camo Poncho, which means the opponent's supporter can't affect your V Star or V Max. You have the Regieleki V Max, but just 2 of those. First off, it has free retreat, so it's usually not getting one shot. And it's not getting stuck in the active if it gets gusted up. So I don't think you want that tool anyway. And what they've done is they put in 3 Leafy Camo Ponchos, so you have more of that than even you have cards that you can Pokemon you could attach it to. That's a very kind of just doesn't make any sense why that's there. So you definitely would want to make some changes there with it. You have 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, 2 Escape Rope, one Energy Recycler, And again, you want to recycle your energy to help set up electric generator later in the game. So maybe a second one of that just to help load the deck with the highest concentration of energies. If you've had, because it plays for research, so if you've discarded your energy recycler and some energies early, you want to kind of load that back up in the deck.
Yeah, I think that's like, I think the deck's pretty like underwhelming though. I haven't actually played it, but I think it's obviously it's like meant to be combined with Rhinon. So I think, um,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's really all there's to say about it. Like
I I'm just
it's
gonna
pretty, I don't know. Yeah.
it's certainly it's not a great deck, although it does. I found it sets up pretty well, so therefore you can win games just because you'll set up. Your opponent's deck probably when they set up is going to beat you, but sometimes you're going to outset them up. So anyway, but it's certainly not the top choice. Well, next deck is one you did a video on, and I think you had good things to say about it, and that's the Arcanine EX deck. So why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. So this one is works on Arcanine EX. Interestingly enough, one thing that I think it is worth mentioning is Pokemon in these decks, like the Pokemon Company or that whoever the makers of this game are, like to they don't like to give you too many like fancy Pokemon, as in like V's, EXs. So that's why you only see a 2-2 Dialga, 2-2 Giratina, 2-2 Regieleki. But because the EXs, the basics and the stage ones,
Mm-hmm.
if it's a stage 2, don't have aren't like EXs or anything, they'll give you more. So we actually see 3 Arcanine EX here, which is
Yep.
kind of nice. It's actually a Terra Pokemon, a Traslow or whatever. And it's very similar to actually Resizard, but it's much worse as well, unfortunately. Um, but it's a first stack Raging Claws. This does 10 more for each damage count on it, base damage of 30 for 2 fire, which is okay. But then the main attack you want to use here is Bright Flame, 250 for 3, and then you discard 2 fire energy from this Pokemon. Um, Now I don't think this build's perfect, but it works okay. This is again an Arvin Stage 2 deck with the barrel. This time running the Charizard line from Pokemon Go. Each basic fire energy attached to your Pokemon provides 2 fire energy, and you can't stack this. Obviously, that'd be kind of weird. Um, this means that if you just have 2 fire energy on Arcanine, you can be using Bright Flame, and then you, instead of needing to discard 2 fire energy cards, you just discard 1 card from it. You can stream it pretty easily. The list also runs this really fun Heatmore from Fusion Strike, which does 90, but if you have 6 energy on it, which is 3 attachments, which isn't awful, you do 180 Snipe to one of their bench.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you have Magma Basin and Raihan to be able to attach energy to your Pokemon. And then I said Arvin with rare candies, Ultra Balls, Nest Balls. Um, and this list also plays Research, Boss Clara. We see EXP share to preserve energy,
Yep.
some ropes to pivot out Barrel. Although you can retreat Barrel pretty easily if you have your Charizard up, because it's only 1 attachment to retreat. And then we also see
Mm-hmm.
Defiance Band, which is all right, I'd say. It's pretty solid on this list.
Yeah, and I don't know. Did you mention the Radiant Charizard in there?
Oh, I did not. Radiant Charizard is actually a very good Pokemon, just in general. In this list, it's pretty good as well. It does 250, and its attack is 1 less for each prize code your opponent's taken. Um, Honestly, it's not anything insane in this list, but it's a good Pokemon in Standard. So you could put this
Mm-hmm.
into your Lost Box deck or some other deck, and it's just good.
Yeah, and I think this is the only Radiant Pokemon I believe in any of the starter decks, and I don't know that they had any of the starter decks
No,
before
what?
either.
No, they have Radiant Greninja in multiple of the starter
Oh, the
decks.
starter decks. Okay, so I take
Mhm.
that back. Not currently though, right? Just the old ones.
No, no, they have it in the current ones. They did not have it in the old ones.
Okay, all right.
We'll
So
get to it, but yeah.
okay, so we'll get to that. But okay, so but getting the Radiant Pokemon is certainly a plus. This deck might not need it as much as, but you'll have uses for it. So I played the deck just a couple times. I just didn't get it going right, but I think I still haven't figured out the deck. I think you think it's a fun deck. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I think it sets up all right. You're definitely gonna be setting up your Charizard in enough games.
Mm-hmm.
It's not amazing. It has serious consistency issues, which obviously you ran into and I ran into some as well.
Yeah.
Um, but it's pretty solid. I think our part of it is I really liked Arcanine EX. I think it's a strong Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd say that Charizard is probably not the best way to play it if you're adapting this into a standard deck. you're probably going to be looking to replace the Charizard line with an Arm Rouge line, allowing you to move energy from your bench Pokemon to your
Mm.
active. Pairing that with Magma Basin being very efficient. Um, as well as with like Raihan, you can set up your Arcanines pretty much every turn, and you shouldn't have too much of a problem as long as you just draw into them.
So I guess like the Arcanine EX, you're wanting to first attack with Bright Flame when you need 3 energy. You discard 2. You're doing 250, hopefully taking 2 prizes. Maybe not, but and then you don't get one shot, hopefully, and then you hit back with Raging Claws. I guess that's the optimal scenario with that
Yeah.
card.
Well, you can also just Bright Flame every turn if you have the Charizard set up, or if you have
Yeah.
like other combos that aren't played in this deck set up.
Right. Yeah. Right. If you have the Charizard, you just need 2 energy, so you can just manually attach. You discard 1 and manually attach per turn. So that works quite well. And also powering one up that's on the bench then with Magna Basin gets pretty simple too. Did you use the other attackers much in the deck, or just really Arcanine?
I no, I would attack with Radiant Charizard some to finish out the
Mm,
game. I used Heat more in one of the games. It's very good if your opponent's like not setting up very well,
yeah.
but really then you're fine anyways. You could honestly get Heat more up as soon as turn 2 though, which is kind of fun. Um, and then I didn't use the Moltres. I attacked with Charizard some, but that was probably like not good. You don't really want to do that. Obviously, it's you're putting your most important Pokemon in the line of fire, but you can attack with it for only 2 attachments, so it's not awful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess right. That might be all you have to do. Yeah. I wasn't able to get the Heat more set up. It was intriguing for sure. And I know the Moltres is kind. We've talked about the Moltres before. It's kind of suspect as to how valuable it is. It attacks for 1 energy, but it doesn't do it enough damage at 90, assuming it's got damage on it. It's not. I mean, yes, you can knock out a single prize Pokemon, a Comfy or something, but it's not great.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, and then also one thing, or a few things, you can play this if you want to adapt this into a standard deck, which I have.
Mm-hmm.
You can play it with Zoroark to set up various stage ones, including Arcanine EX,
Mm.
Armor Rouge, and a Rapidash, as well as other Zoroark attackers. So you can have a fire toolbox, which I think is pretty strong.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? These as the EXs stage ones, you can evolve. You can swap out your Zoroark for that, and they did give you in live and the battle pass before this, right? The Zoroarks, I believe, or was it
They
two ago?
it was oh, what did they? Yeah, it was 2 ago, and they only
Okay,
gave you a 2/2 line as
two.
well. So
Okay, it gave you a start
um,
though for getting some of the pieces for that.
yeah, and that's not that expensive, so
No, it's
it's
not.
pretty solid.
All right.
Um, yeah. What do you want to go to
So think.
next?
All right. So a deck that causes me grief to discuss it. I will say Superior V Star, and I also want to say the name wrong, but that's its own issue. But I played the deck works as well for me as my naming saying the name of the deck. It's um right now I'd say this is the worst of the decks. But it's a weird deck to me, and I certainly don't have it figured out yet. So Superior V Star 270 HP, which is low for a V Star. It does
It's
Regal,
not that. It's probably a lot have 270, but there's some with less.
I
Or I mean, a
guess.
lot have 280, but some have
Right,
like
280 is more a
less.
little more common now. It gets buffed by Cricketune. We'll talk about the HP. It's a stage 1, and your grass Pokemon get 40 HP more. It doesn't apply to Cricketune, but it applies to your other grass Pokemon, and you can't stack the ability. It just plays a 1/1 line of that. So when I was playing it, this deck, my opponent was at some point knocking out my Cricketune or my Cricketot, and then I lost that ability for the game, which makes it very vulnerable because it's got Regal Blender. 190 does for 3 energy is okay, but it's not it's not the greatest thing. Then you can move as your any amount of energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon any way you like. So it can be grass. It plays DTE energy. You can move any of those special or basic, and you can move it between any of your Pokemon from bench to bench, whatever you want. So you can kind of set things up the next turn. And I probably need to get that down a little bit more, what I want to do. You have the Star Winder attack, the V Star Power, which does 60 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon, and then you switch it with one of your bench Pokemon. That's for one grass. So, and then DTE counts as two with that attack. It's not just basic energy, correct?
Yeah. A few things I want to say about this. One, Regal Blender is not very good because you only play like your only attackers. Well, essentially your only attackers is the 2/2 superior.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not super useful, unfortunately. And then also it has free retreat, which is nice. As well as the Altaria, which I think we should talk about. I'll talk about now.
Oh yeah.
Which it would the only thing that would make this better is if it ran and Scrove it. No, but so Altaria, the one from Evolving Skies, has this ability Tempting Tune that says you can just search your deck for support or stack it on top of your deck. And
Right.
then Altaria also is free to here, but you can draw straight into that with Kricketune V or Muku. That's why those two are in the deck.
Hmm.
And you play a moderately wide variety of supporters. You play Avery, Boss's Orders, Good News Vigor, Jack, Persis Research, Raihan, Roxanne, and Worker, which are all moderately versatile. Like when you have access to all of them, it's pretty nice. I would probably like to see a few different cards in here, but this alignment of supporters isn't awful by any means.
Hmm.
And it does not run a pal pad, which I think could be good. But then we also see that we played the other Altaria. First, obviously, we play four Swablu, then two of each Altaria.
Yep.
And this one has its attack, and this is from Silver Tempest. Is not lovable, searchable, has more HP here, 110. Magical Echo, move all damage counters from one of your bench Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon for 2 colors. So likely going to be double turbo, though it could be 2 grass energy.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's nice being able to heal them off. I personally would like to see Cheryl in this list. But really interestingly, this list plays Leafy Camo Poncho, two of it, and this actually has solid value because you want to be able to like keep your
Hmm.
superiors like healthy, and
Right.
that's kind of the idea of the deck. You move the energy around, you kind of heal some. Unfortunately, superior just doesn't do a lot of damage and is kind of awkward to set up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is fun when I play it when you get the and having the both Altarias is useful, right? The Altaria with Tempting Tune setting up for your draw for either your current turn, like you because you have the Pukumuku, like you said, that's an easy way to kind of get that supporter into hand that turn, or you're setting up your draw for next turn. Obviously, the fact that judges what people play instead of Marnie then disrupts that for you, but you take your chances there. But then when you use the other Altaria with the magical echo and you switch, you hopefully have a superior Viper, a superior V Star with a lot of damage on it. You heal it up and hopefully knock out your opponent's active. It's a very fun turn, right? All of a sudden your V Star is healthy and your opponent's like V against you has been knocked out. It feels nice, but setting it up and making it, it just doesn't happen that easily, and probably not often enough, I didn't think.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I only played it like once. I think maybe twice. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
awkward to use. It just isn't good enough. I don't think. Also, the Altaria itself is just gonna like die. Um, it seems in theory very good, but your superior can just kind of get one shotted as well by way too many decks in the format. So
Right.
it's okay, but I'm not a. This is possibly, as you said, like the weakest
It
one.
and
I
it and
think.
it is a tricky deck, right? I mean, I'm starting to see it, but it's the pieces and what you do. You have to obviously you're choosing from amongst all these different supporters. I certainly think it'd be nice to probably put in a judge to disrupt your opponent and give a few more
Yeah.
options there. So they probably should shift that around. It plays two Gardenia's Vigor. Maybe that makes sense with this deck. It
Oh,
probably
none of the lists play judge, right? I don't think.
I think that might be true.
Yeah,
That's
which seems like I think a very important card. In the format right now, it's just very good.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and they should have included that in one of the lists, even if it didn't make as much sense for that list, just to give these cards to players, because that's what you're giving decks to play, but you're also giving people access to the key cards. So, and that is a very important card, and I think Judge probably is a rare. It would be my guess, and therefore it's more expensive to craft. I think it's 400 to craft, so that giving that would have been nice. But I did make use of the Gardenia's Vigor with that at sometimes with Superior V Star. Sometimes I used it to set up the Altaria, since that needed 2 energy, and if I had 2 grass in hand, and you have your other Altaria that's a free pivot, so you could set up the Magical Echo attack with that also, plus Magical Echo, yes, and then and draw some cards with it. So how to sequence it is, I got to figure that out. I think you either need a 2/2 line of the Cricketune, because that's very important. Because without that Cricketune, your Superior V Star is probably not surviving a hit. You really need that to survive a hit to be able to shift the damage across to your opponent on the next turn. Um, and then what are the tools right now that would add HP? I'm trying to. Is there anything
Yeah,
right
I
now?
think there's
Have we
obviously,
lost them?
which is in the Origin Form Dialga V-Star deck, you get the full face shield, I think.
Right, which would help. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could run that in this list. I think that's fine. But I really would also like to see Cheryl in this list. I think that just has solid value. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but honestly, that it's fine. I'm not a superior player. I did not play this deck like ever before. I don't think many people did, but I know
No.
some people did. And so, yeah, I'd be interested in hearing if there's like potential to this deck or not.
Yeah, I mean, of all the decks, this is one that the main Pokemon just has never really gotten much attention. And I probably because there's just better options out there. I think so. Um, anyway, so maybe you can make something of the deck. It's not hasn't been strong for us. So I think moving on, and going to talk about the Koraidon EX, which I know you played. I think you've made a video of. I played a little bit. You want to talk about that deck list for us? Another EX, and here, as like you said before, with the Vs, they don't give you a lot of those because you need the evolve from a V. Here, it's the EX, a basic, and they actually give you 4 of that, and actually they give you another EX also, so you get 5 EX in the deck, which is quite nice.
Yeah. Honestly, Koraidon EX isn't a very good attacker. The deck is kind of underwhelming. It also has bad typing. But Koraidon EX
Yeah,
with its ability Dino Crisis, once during your turn, you may discard up or may attach up 2 basic fighting energy for cards from your discard pile to your basic fighting Pokemon in any way you would like. And then if you use this ability, your turn ends.
yeah,
So the idea is that you use this during the first turn of the game. Now keep in mind that you definitely want to be running Radiant Greninja. It runs 4 Ultra Ball, but that's the only way of getting it in the discard turn 1.
yeah.
You can get it in the discard later with a Revavroom, which is interesting. But
Hmm.
honestly, Babero would probably be better here. And then Koraidon does 220 for 3, and then you can't attack with it next turn.
Yeah.
And then Great Tusk EX is another fighting type Pokemon, 250 HP now, unlike Koraidon, which has 230. But then it says Bedrock Breaker 40 and discard a stadium and play. You have no choice. You have to do that. Gigantic Tusks 250 and does 50 to itself. These aren't bad attacks. And then we see this list plays Lake Acuity, reducing the damage you take if you have fighting energy attached. And then
Yeah.
Brock Chestplate, also reducing the damage to fighting Pokemon. Meaning it's kind of tanky. Unfortunately, Koraidon can't really like take a lot of advantage of this because you can't attack multiple turns in a row. And
Yeah.
then like Great Tusk, your attack it damages yourself, or the other attack it discards the stadium, which is reducing the damage. So unfortunately, I don't think this deck has enough tanking potential, but I think it's still pretty solid.
Yeah, and the Koraidon, it can't attack the next turn, and the retreat cost is 2. So you don't. I mean, I guess you can discard them to get them back into play, but then you don't get to attack them. Now, it plays a Deancey, which is important too, right? Because if you're going to use your ability with a Koraidon on the bench, you have a Deancey in the active, and then your opponent can't boss up your Koraidon or whatever Pokemon you attach the energy to. So it probably should play another Deancey as the game gets going, because I don't believe there's any Pokemon recovery here, and there isn't a tool, an item to do that anyway. So probably, I think I've lost my Deancey early, and I think I've wanted to get the Deancey into
Yeah. Well,
play again.
you could do Rescue Carrier to recover
Oh
Diancey.
yeah, right. Its HP is low enough for that, so that would be good. And when I played the deck, I will say I think each time I matched up against Gardevoir, and
Yeah, that's not good because Gardevoir resists you and
yes,
hits you for weakness. Um, So yeah, you're almost always going to lose that. But then there's one other line here, actually, the Lucario line, which is
Mm.
really cool. It plays two Riolus and then two different Lucarios.
Yep.
First of all, the older one, they're born from Brilliant Stars. Yeah. Roaring Resolve here, which is the same actually as the theme deck Charizard. But
Mm.
Lucario says once during a turn, you may put two damage counters on this Pokemon, which isn't a big deal because it has relatively low HP. And if
Yep.
you do search your deck for a fighting energy, attach it to this Pokemon, allowing you to set itself up. And then its attack here, Aura Sphere Volley does 10, and then you discard all fighting energy. It does 60 more for each energy. So you can hit a moderately high damage with that. You do run 12 energy as well. No way of putting it back into the deck. But then you also run this other Lucario from the new set, Scarlet Violet, with this really solid attack here, Avenging Knuckle. And this is honestly the best thing in the whole deck for when fighting. If one of your fighting Pokemon is knocked out last turn, you hit for 150, which is pretty good for one energy. It's 130 HP means it can live, and you can even power up
Mm.
Accelerating Stab if your opponent's playing very passively. And then you also
Yep.
run Gutsy Pickaxe, which says reveal the top card of your deck. If that's a fighting energy, attach it to one of your bench
Mm.
Pokemon. Otherwise, just draw it. So, oh, and then another fighting type synergy card is Grant here,
Yep.
which is essentially Leon for fighting type Pokemon, except that you can recover it and discard two cards from your hand, um, which is okay. But I'd say this list is like, it's pretty fun, but it kind of like, it can kind of stall out during the mid game. It's okay, but honestly, the Lucarios are pretty important, and you can kind of recover some stuff with Clara. I'd like to see another Clara or a Miriam in
Yeah.
this list, though. So it's all right, and I think it has potential, and you can go different routes with it.
Yeah, and they give you trekking shoes, which is a very useful card for a lot of decks. So it's not bad. And like you said, the Grant, which is a you know, uh, certainly it boosts your damage. Plus, you could use it to get the energies in the discard to accelerate if that's your plan too. Um, the Koraidon, like you said, it's not great. The typing right now is not good. Um, it's probably something that at some point it's going to be good though, right? It's just something's going to come out that's going to work with this deck, and it'll be good. And I think, oh, like you said, with the Koraidon, it accelerates from the discard, and the turn you want to use the ability is particularly turn one, because you're not attacking for much damage then anyway, and if you're going first, you can't attack anyway. But I usually, with the couple games I did, I wasn't able to get energy in the discard turn one usually because you're very limited in being able to do that. So, it just wasn't great in that regard. So,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this list has potential. Some people are saying it's going to be really good. I don't think it's going to be amazing, but I think it has potential. But you need to change it. It's worth like a spin though, but it's not anything amazing.
yeah, and want to talk now about one of my favorite decks of the past, and that's Lunatone Soul Rock, which includes the Mewtwo V Star in this one. So a very fun deck. I've enjoyed that in the past with some different builds. You play the four Lunatone. You have Cycle Draw, which you sometimes can use, especially on your first turn if you go first, where you discard a card from your hand, which would be a Psychic Energy. And if you do, you draw three cards. But then the Moon Kinesis does 30 plus 30 more for each Psychic Energy attached to this Pokemon. So, and you play 13 Psychic Energy. That's all you play, basic Psychic Energy. So that is decent. It adds up, and then you play the Soul Rock, which has the Sun Energy ability. Once during your turn, you may attach a Psychic Energy card from your discard pile to one of your Lunatones. So you get up some damage, all right, with that. Now, this deck suffers probably the most of any that at least the ones that I played, with the loss of Scoop Up Net, because obviously that was a switch card, but allowed you to reuse your soul rocks on a turn to really build up to a huge Lunatone attack, and you don't have that anymore, so that definitely hurts the deck. And one Radiant Greninja to help discard energy and draw, and then two Mewtwo V Star, which I have used a little in the past, but not a lot, so I'm getting used to that. where it does Psi Purge. It does 90. It takes 2 energy, and you can discard up to 3 psychic energy from your Pokemon, from any of your Pokemon. So you probably want to be discarding from a Lunatone on the bench, assuming you have it set up that way. You discard up to 3 psychic energy. It does 90 damage for each card discarded, so it does 270, which is good. Obviously, it'd be a lot better if you could discard a 4th one and get high, because you're coming up short on a lot of Pokemon, unfortunately, and that's not a good feeling when you're just like missing by 10 on a lot of Pokemon. And then it's got the Raid Star V Star power. It does 120 to each of your opponent's Pokemon V, which you can do once per game. But obviously with EXs, that attack is less useful. And then it plays, let's see, supporters, Professor's Research, Cynthia's Ambition. Again, which is good with the Lunatones attacking. That gets knocked out. You can draw to 8. Plays a couple Avery to draw and to disrupt your opponent, hopefully. 4 Cross Switcher. I don't know if that's great with this deck. I'm not sure you're hitting those off.
I think the idea is like Pokestop.
Yeah, you get it.
I think that's the whole idea. Right.
Right. Pokestop gets right. You want more items, less supporters to do that. Right. So Cross Switcher you can hit where Boss would just get discarded. No tools, and as you mentioned, Pokestop, the change of tools are no longer considered items. Before rotation, you would get your tools into hand also with Pokestop. Now your tools will get discarded, so tools are less valuable in this deck. Some Nest Ball, Fog Crystal, which is good. Plays 3. Probably want to play a 4th one. That's a good card to get energy or Pokemon. Raihan to accelerate energy and such. So it's again, honestly, the deck was pretty successful when I played it, and it's still a fun, it's a solid meme deck is what to do. It's a meme deck, but that can win games for you.
Yeah, yes. I haven't. I don't really like Lunatone Solak.
No.
It's an okay deck. Honestly, this is pretty close to like the best Lunatone Solak deck you can make.
Yeah.
It's not very good right now. Especially like when you can compare it directly to stuff like Godor EX. Because they're kind of similar, and then Lunatone just looks awful. So yeah, if you enjoy it, you can play it. But,
all right.
yeah.
Here, well, first I'll say a bad to goods. First, if your opponent plays Klefki, then you just cry because your basics have no abilities and you can't do anything. But here's the good things about it. One you've already said is this deck list is pretty optimized, so you could tweak it some, but it's
about as like good as the other decks too.
Well, but look, this deck list is pretty optimized, right. The other ones all need work. The other thing is, yes, it's not the top deck. It's never been great, right? It got overplayed for a bit. It was decent, but this deck is pretty straightforward to play. So if you're someone that's new, this isn't a bad place to start because this deck is about as effective as the other decks, right? Because this is a good build, the other decks are suboptimal builds. The decision making is usually pretty linear with this, right? Which I know you don't like that, but what do? You attack with Lunatone, you throw energies on it with Soul Rock. You don't, right?
But you do it in the other order.
What's that?
Well,
yeah, I know. You attach and then you attack and you discard energy with Radiant Greninja. It's all pretty simple with this deck, right? You just figure out when to attack with Mewtwo. In such. So, in fact, it's gotten easier now that I think Scoop Up Net's rotated. It makes the deck worse, but Scoop Up Net brought the high level of decision making as far as high as it got for this deck of when to use the nets, when to save them. That was the biggest decision before, and that's gone now. So the deck is pretty easy to play, and the win rates I think will be decent on it. So it's not a bet. As a starter deck, I think it's good, but beyond that, yes, it's not that good.
Yeah, and then I think it's time to talk about the last deck here.
Yep.
The greatest deck of all time. No, I don't know. A deck that was quite good.
Yes.
Palkia V-Star. And Palkia V-Star is a pretty good Pokemon with its ability to accelerate energies to your water Pokemon. Three water energies from your Disco Pal to your water Pokemon any way you like. That's pretty strong. And this list does play some ways of getting the water energy into the discard in the form of Ultra Ball and Radiant Greninja, and you can attack with the Radiant Greninja as well, which is solid. And then Subspace Swell, this does 60 plus 20 more for each bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. It's just a very powerful attack, and this list plays enough basic Pokemon to get it to work. And then the rest of the list is it's something, right?
It's interesting, right? And it's interesting. It's kind of fun to
Yeah.
play, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, when I
Go ahead.
saw this, I thought it was awful. I'll just say that. It plays the Swim Freely package, I guess, with the Finion's ability to accelerate water energy to your swim Pokemon and swim freely, which would be your Seadra and your Dugong. Um, and then it doesn't actually play a ton of energy though, and I've honestly found the loss of Capacious Bucket really not great for this deck.
Hmm.
Surprisingly, I thought it was going to be that bad, but you said it was going to be bad, and it was. Um,
I told you the Capacious Bucket was a really good card. You always laughed at me. Now
Yeah.
you're seeing
I mean, it's not that great, but it's like
it's a
it
big plus
hurts.
getting 2/1. And
Hmm.
it helped these water decks, but yeah.
But then it runs the Kingdra, I guess, is debatably your like as a very important part of the deck with the Seething
Yeah.
Currents ability, allowing you to shuffle. Essentially, you Marnie one player. They shuffle their hand, put it on the bottom of their deck, draw four, and you do that to either yourself or to your opponent. So it can be a draw engine for you or a disruption tool on your opponent, both of which are valid.
Hmm.
Then Kingdra here from Battle Styles, which does its ability essentially says that whenever your active is knocked out, you can move any water energy from that Pokemon to this Pokemon. And then that's nice to preserve energy. And then also
Hmm.
Aqua Burst is 40 for each energy. That's not a ton of damage. And then we see other Pokemon similar like Dugong, um, that says which is 40 times you can like accelerate put the energy attached to it into your deck and do 40 for each energy in that way. Same multipliers Kingdra, and then Seadra does 20 times, um, but then it's a bench snipe, so they're both fine. We see this list
Hmm.
running rare Candy and Irido, it's a solid package, and very powerful Palkia.
Yep.
We also see 4 Battle VIP Pass. We see Lake Acuity in this list as well, which is kind of surprising. I don't think the list needs tanking, but it plays that. And then Candace to allow you to search for, or to kind of search for water Pokemon and energy, which is okay.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, you have an obviously it's all water Pokemon, so you're going to hit some things with it. Sometimes that's as good as Irida potentially. It's nice that they give you for Irida. It's a useful card. It's an expensive one to craft because it's a rare, so it's nice they give us that. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I think if you compare this list to the way, obviously the way Palkia was before rotation, you kind of laugh and say this is garbage. I'm not sure how you'd play Palkia now. Probably not with this list if you were building it on your own and had the cards. Um, but it's interesting, right? And I do think the two different Kindras are interesting. Obviously, the ability to get cards, to get a fresh 4 cards each turn for yourself with Seething Currents is nice, or disrupt your opponent on the occasion you want to. If you can get the other Kindra set up where you're accelerating energy to it as your other cards get knocked out, then the Kindra can become a very dangerous card later in the game. Hopefully, you can make that work. Although I did find I got to the point with this deck pretty much when I'm having to use swim freely and hope I flip heads, right? Because there you do 10 damage, and if you hit heads, that it prevents all damage and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon, and that's obviously not where you want to be. But I kind of found myself in that spot.
Yeah. So, I honestly was surprised. It wasn't awful by any means. It was on par with the other decks, which was not what I was expecting.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know where you go with it. I'm sure there are Palkia masters out there who just probably know exactly what to do, but I don't. But I honestly think all the decks are pretty cool.
Hmm.
I'm pretty happy with what Pokemon did here. And also with the free decks on the ladder. The Gardevoir deck in terms of engines, the Gardevoir deck gives you the Curly engine, but you need to
Hmm.
make sure you get that. That's why I highly recommend you go into live. You don't migrate, but you go into live.
Yeah.
Then I also think that it's nice they give you a barrel engine and a Reverum engine. I'd argue they're in the wrong decks, but
Hmm.
whatever. And then also they give you the most important Radiant Pokemon, and they give you the Lost Zone engine as
Yeah.
well as some Altarias, which I think it gives you pretty much any engine piece you need. The one
Hmm.
thing we mentioned, Judge not being in here isn't ideal, but oh, and also, you don't necessarily have Arceus unless you logged in during last season.
Right.
So yeah, that's unfortunate if you don't have that. Also, Mew, you could have gotten Mew. a number of times. Although Mew is relatively easy to pick up in the shop, and
Right.
Arceus will have a product coming out with it, but it's not great.
Okay, Arceus is
The
it
trainer's toolkit.
okay? Not a like a high tier league battle deck like the Shadow and Ice Rider or Mew though. Okay.
No, we will see a league battle deck for Palkia, though, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I'll say is the decks are all they're all decent. Certainly, I think for starter decks, I kind of like it. Because they're not giving you the best decks, which is probably appropriate, but it's a good place to start, and then you can upgrade them. So that I think that's appropriate for new players. And the decks are kind of fun, I gotta say. And I wouldn't mind. We talked before about a alternate format. If there was a format, a starter deck format, I think that could be kind of fun because the decks they have their good aspects, but they also have their awkwardness, and you get some little fun decision making. That wouldn't be a bad alternate format if they wanted to provide that.
Yeah, I think so. And also, I mentioned before that a random deck format, I might like work on that. And that would probably be just cards from these starter decks.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say if I should include cards from. I'm definitely going to be including all the cards from these starter decks. But should I include cards from the Battle Pass decks, from past Battle Pass decks, and from past starter decks? Keep in mind they all need to be in current standard, I believe, because you can't play against um
Right, you can't do
s-
friends in expanded.
yeah, so that's kind of bad. But yeah, I hope they add that back in. That's a very big deal. But yeah, you can play the like the old starter deck. Like I could make a random point with old starter decks included in that like pool of cards as well as the new starter decks. I haven't really messed around with it, but I'm interested in doing that.
Okay. Yeah. So it's nice getting these new decks. It's been fun playing them, and I'm still not done getting to know these decks and then looking to modify them. So it's and again, it's much better than also compared to PTCG, a new player. You get those relatively useless theme decks. So it's an improved situation. Hopefully, they get live working, and you want to wrap things up for us.
Yeah. So, obviously, check us out on other platforms if you want. We are on YouTube. We are also on various podcast platforms,
Yep.
including Spotify, whatever the Apple one is.
Yeah, Amazon, a number of others.
Yeah, so go check us out on those. And if you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate if you subscribed on either of our channels on Ten Types or Uncommon Fossil. You might be able to leave a rating, and of course, comments are also very much appreciated. I'm not actually sure if we can see the comments on any platform other than Spotify and obviously YouTube. We can see the comments. I don't even know if
Right.
Spotify has comments, but if you want us to hear your feedback, the YouTube comment section will definitely be the best way to like give feedback.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you listening if you got that far, because we've been talking for quite a while. But we hope
Yes.
you enjoyed. And as always, we're excited to see you in the next podcast.
Take care.